Welcome to the second episode of Junto Club. On this episode, we find a better way to mediate social media arguments. Matt argues against student loan cancellation. We solve the student debt crisis. And we think about how much lead-up time before death we would need before we act self-destructively. For any questions, comments, or hate at Matt, email juntoclubpodcast@gmail.com. This is Junto Club.
Junto Club.
Welcome to the Junto Club, episode 2, where we attempt to take inspiration from Benjamin Franklin and discuss important topics of the day to improve ourselves, but instead we just ramble.
Exactly.
That can be our official intro.
I imagine that's what they do back in the day as well.
That's true. They probably have like these documents that are like all really official, but then half the time in there they're just like bullshitting.
Yeah.
But you know.
Yeah. So I guess we'll start with another thing that I learned by reading his autobiography, like something I found about conversation. Basically, I think it's a good place to start. And the one thing he talked about, like when he was younger days, right? When he's like maybe 19, 20, right? 19 years old and 20 years old, he read a book, and then in that book he found something called the Socratic method of conversation when he discussed, like, talk to people, right? So in the beginning, he would talk to very people just like naturally, like other people would be like arguing, right? Like debating, like say, hey, you know, this is the right way to think about this topic. And then in the Socratic method, he came across that, he started using that, right? Basically, instead of using the argument and debating, he basically just keep asking the people who is talking to having some kind of opinion. He just keep asking questions, right? Keep asking, and he found that very much more useful in a way to sometimes to have the people you're talking to basically question their own assumptions as well, right? So in the end, you know, they might, in a way, you kind of make them realize, oh, maybe my opinion is flaw or something like that. So I find that very interesting, so useful as well. So I think, Matt, you can probably explain the Socratic method better. So why don't you go ahead?
I appreciate the assumption that I know everything, but that's you already got to the limit of my knowledge of the Socratic method. Have you ever the basic idea is to just ask people questions a lot. Have you used it ever, Shu? Have you just applied it on anyone?
Not yet. But I think over our conversation, I feel like over our conversation, like during our lunchtime, right? Like past few years, I feel like you were doing that a lot. Like for me, I think I have an impulse just jump to say, hey, this is wrong, you know. But you always ask me, like, why do you think that's wrong, right? So I feel like you use that a lot already. So you're a master of that already. So were you aware that you were using it, or were you using it consciously, or just a habit?
Probably more of a habit. I did take a few philosophy courses, but we never explicitly covered the Socratic method. But the way the professors structured class might have rubbed off on me.
Oh, really? Okay. So when did you ever hear the phrase Socratic method?
Yeah, I've heard it before, and like I said, I was familiar with like the very basic concept, but I don't think I've ever seen like someone break it down specifically or tried see an example of like, hey, here's how I'm going to do it. It's just, you know, I'm familiar with the concept of you just kind of ask questions to like challenge them instead of, you know, saying what you believe.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I thought you used it more so, Shu. I feel like every time I bring up anything, your first thing is like, why? Or like, what about this?
Okay. Yeah. Maybe I see Matt doing that a lot, so maybe he rub up on me as well. So I don't know.
Yes.
I feel like Shu just likes playing devil's advocate is the real secret. True. He'll argue anything time me and Micah have a consensus on something, he'll just be like, I'm going to take the most absurd position just to bring a different viewpoint in.
No, he definitely does that as well. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. Any more thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I can see it being useful just in the sense of like, I mean, it's, I guess, if your questions aren't overly pointed, then I guess it's sort of a way to have people sort of naturally come to say maybe some disagreement within themselves versus just like more abrasively like you're wrong. So I mean, I guess it can be useful in that respect.
Yeah.
Shu, here's what you need to do. You need to come up with a Socratic method that works well for like the modern internet like conversation that is like the majority of like people discussing issues these days. Because I feel like the Socratic method requires like a fairly long conversation, right? Because you have to have this like continuous back and forth for a while. But like, you know, in reality, people are like tweeting replies to each other or like, you know, yelling at on Fox News for like 2 minutes before commercial break. So how do you apply the Socratic method in those situations?
Well, I don't think you can apply that to those situations, right? So I guess those are more like they were thinking coming into the debate of like convincing the other instead of like they were just like so they are not. I guess to use that first, you need to be both coming in need to be very open-minded. At least even the person that want to use it need to be very open-minded, right? Of coming into a conversation and try to learn basically, right? But if you're not in the mindset, it would be hard to do it, right? Right. Well, I guess I don't know. Yeah, I guess I need to figure out how to do that in a modern day social media age, right? So yeah. So, but I guess for yourself, I guess we can always just like instead of be a little more minded, just like asking questions, like avoid the using the words like certainly and undoubtedly, like don't use like a lot of like very okay. I believe this, you know, this is correct, you know, this is the right thing to do. You say, oh, I heard it somewhere, and then stuff like that, you know, to add a little bit uncertainty into your own. Whatever your opinion try to convey, I guess. Yeah. I don't know.
I always add uncertainty to my opinions 100% of the time.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay. Actually, so I have a question about your philosophy class. Like, what did they teach you there?
So I took two. The first one was an intro to philosophy, and then the second one was an ethics course. Mm-hmm. The intro was just I needed a random like humanities or whatever elective, and I just kind of picked from like 5 or 6. I didn't really, honestly, at that point, I didn't know much about philosophy as like a subject, but it was actually a super interesting class because they didn't like go through and talk about like old philosophers like in a history thing. They like briefly kind of covered some basic like formal argument logic stuff. And then they just like went through and like covered like really interesting questions, you know, obviously the ones that, you know, like, does God exist? You know, things about like morality, things about like, is reality like objective or subjective? And like just these other social questions that were just fun to discuss. And yeah, it was just a really fun class. If you, not that anyone's actually going to listen to this, but if you're like, I need a bullshit class and then there's like an intro philosophy elective, I would recommend it. The ethics one was more just to cover some other bases. It wasn't as good focusing on ethics entirely because, I mean, you can only go so deep into ethics until it's kind of like, you know, ethics is subjective, you know, whatever, utilitarianism versus deontology. Yeah, I don't know.
Hey, it's using the appropriate toolbox at the appropriate time, right?
Yeah, don't get into that, Mike.
Oh, and I also solved the problem of how to have better civil online discussions. So you have a virtual avatar next to the communication window that shows you if you're behaving poorly or behaving well. And so you're self-reflective. And the company that makes that should cite a thesis that appears on mobilerobotics.com or whatever it is. mobilerobotlab.com.
Every tweet will just have like an emoji face representing like how that tweet makes the emoji feel.
Yeah, that's right.
Interesting.
So what do you mean by the two kids? Like Mike was saying.
He's getting into the like ethical governor stuff. So hypothetically, people listening to this don't know, but like the mobile robot lab we were all a part of did like research and like ethics and like putting ethics into robots. And one of the part of the research was like you could consider different ethical frameworks and how like you might apply each one to a robot, right? So like utilitarianism is like you try to estimate some cost of actions and like pick the best one. Deontology, you have rules that say like you can never do like this is off limit, that's off limit, like you must do that, blah blah blah. Is that basically accurate, Mike?
Yeah. I mean, I was a TA for like an ethics course at Georgia Tech, and yeah, I mean, basically, it's like I mean, there is literally just like the idea that ethics is totally like just relativistic to like culture or whatever, and the argument against that is like no, like we have these sort of, I guess, more like objective ethical frameworks, but maybe one isn't like as appropriate in a certain context as the other. So, I mean, like, for example, like utilitarianism is often what's used by companies because essentially you're just converting everything to dollar signs. And so a product that essentially is going to cost more than it earns is unethical in the sense of like, if it's dangerous, like you're going to get sued for like $10 million for every like life it loses or whatever. So. So you're able to convert things more easily and make an ethical decision. Whereas I guess like day-to-day interactions, maybe deontology is, I guess, the better framework. So because, you don't want to use people as like, or you want to treat people as ends in themselves or whatever there.
So you're saying you never applied Kantianism into a robot?
I don't believe so.
That would be an interesting paper there.
Yes.
All right. So talking about philosophy, going back to that a little bit. So recently I heard a quote from Peter Thiel. He says, engineering is the opposite of education, right? So since we are all engineers here, so what's your thoughts on that?
Did he explain that more?
Well, yes, I guess so. So we're talking about philosophy, right? You took the philosophy class, and he actually teach you how to talk to people, right? Engineering is it's not the skill, right? It's a trade almost in a way. So it doesn't really educate people, right? It just like teach you a skill, and then you go out find a job, right? And it doesn't really teach you how to think, even though I gone through whole and my PhD, undergrad, something called everybody thinks, engineer are really good at analytic thinking, but I had no idea what analytic thinking means, even though I went through all these schools, right? So basically, I think since he was philosophy major. He never done engineering, but he's philosophy major and he went to law school, became a lawyer, right? But still, he was able to create. He's in the top tier of the Silicon Valley. He's a technology, right, startup and stuff like that, right? So that's his point, right? He's like engineering is almost opposite of education, where because philosophy teaches you how to think, where engineering doesn't really do that, right?
Yeah, no, I will agree with that maybe halfway.
Yeah.
So philosophy does try to teach you how to think, like the right way to approach that stuff, kind of. And I think it's kind of like philosophy is really great to teach people at like everyone. Like I would almost argue almost everyone should do some basic philosophy to learn like the basics of like logic and argumentation and trying to think. But it's like the impacts of like deep philosophy aren't really that great. Like there's like at some point that once you study philosophy enough, you're just like you quickly get to the point where like, okay, people are kind of arguing over things that don't really matter to real life at all. Like there's not going to be any impact. Well, engineering is sort of the opposite. Like the impacts of like good engineering are massive on humanity. But I agree that engineering doesn't explicitly teach you how to think analytically. Like I never had a class that, said like, this is what we're going to do, in an engineering school. But I would argue that you learn it implicitly through the fact that most of your classes involve a similar kind of like breaking down of problems, trying to like find the core, like, assumptions, the constants, and just like a methodical process that, and because I've heard this exactly, like they people like think like an engineer because like once you do enough of that, you kind of sort to think and approach problems a certain way. based on how all your classes have done it. But yeah, they don't tell you like this is how to approach problems in general. It's just you do it in one class and then another, then another, then another. So I don't think it's entirely right. I just think it's more implicit.
Yeah. I mean, I think like my CS2 class in college was very much like, I guess, sort of structured to try to help you. Like, as Matt says, it was more of, I guess, implicit than explicit type thinking, or type learning, I should say. But yeah, it was very much about like algorithm design and like thinking algorithmically. So like, how do you sort of, basically step one, step two, or I guess describe a problem and then break it down into, I guess, sub problems and then decide the steps to execute the solution for those. So
I do think computer science, by its nature, is just closer to like a more pure conceptualization of like, it's computation, right? So it's much closer to just like, here's like a pure problem that you have to solve, while engineering, since it deals with real stuff, does tend to focus more on like, those details. It's less abstract problem solving compared to computer science. So I think computer science probably does a better job, but.
Mm-hmm.
So what does analytical thinking means to you guys? What does it actually mean? Like, yeah.
You want to go first this time, Mike?
Sure. I guess, I feel like I'm being just very literal here. I mean, I feel like it's thinking that in which you, I guess, take a step back and do some type of analysis to solve the problem. I guess you take a step back, use the data and evidence available to you at a given time to make the most informed, educated decision. I don't know. So.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, this is an interesting question because it is something people bring up, but I've never heard like defined explicitly. But I don't know. I feel like analytic thinking is really about being able to break down a problem into the appropriate parts. Because like almost any complex problem, it's really, there's going to be like multiple parts to it that are, and like finding the right way to break down and frame things is like what leads you to like a good solution, right? Because I mean, that's what like all of our PhDs do, right? We like start with some research question on a topic, and then we look at how we want to like break that down and view that problem. So often that's like finding independent components, or breaking down like possible options, right? Like if you're trying to engineer something, like you might realize, okay, like there's actually only two fundamental ways we can approach this. And then you try to figure out, the pros and cons of each, or things like that. So it's all about piecing it. Yeah, I'm going to say breaking it down for the 8th time, but it's all about breaking it down into like bite-sized pieces that you can actually like deal with.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think, sounds like, I think both of your answers kind of combine it would be a good way to thinking about analytic thinking. Like, Matt, you're talking about like break it down, right? And I think Mike's is more about like, once you break it down, you have a small piece and you come up with a hypothesis in a way and try to testing it, evidence, and then say if this is the correct answer. And then you iterate a little bit, keep testing, right? In a way, right? And then, so it's almost like break it down and then apply scientific method in a way, right?
Yeah. Break it down and look at the data. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
Slightly related, I think personally that about 95% of basically all subjects in all fields are actually pretty simple. It's just a matter of like learning enough stuff. Like as complex as computers are, if you go down to like each little piece of how a computer is made, like everything from like the logic gates or, code for the operating system, most of that's all pretty simple. There's just a lot of it, right? It's just the built up of a lot of really small, simple parts. There are very few ideas that I have found that are like truly like a deep idea, like a very deep, complex idea that you can't like separate. It's just fundamentally complex. And most of those are in physics. So like, unless you're like getting into like theoretical physics, Maxwell's equations of electrodynamics, things for quantum mechanics and stuff, then you get to stuff that's like generally like equations that like massive deep impacts that you can't just like separate out. But
Yeah.
almost everything else seems to be fairly simple. It's just, there's just a lot of it and you have to take it one step at a time.
I see. So you can apply that analytical thinking, like break it down, not just to solving a problem. You can apply it to learning as well. Okay, that's nice. So it's like, I think I did hear like recently people talking about how do you approach learning like cryptocurrency, right? Bitcoin, right? How do you, if you want to understand it, what do you do, right? So you basically break it. I think the suggestion is that you break it down, go back to the fundamentals. Now you start with like, instead of like start with like cryptocurrency, right? You start with like cryptography, right? In the beginning, right? How do you encrypt stuff and decrypt stuff? That's basically the fundamentals of that. You break it down into small pieces and then build it up, basically. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Well, like with something like Bitcoin, like it's hard if you just try to jump in and you're missing, like, I guess the foundations. But, you know, once you, understand all the tools and stuff it's built on, then it's like, it's an interesting idea, but it's not something that's like mind-blowingly complex to understand. You're just like, oh, that's a clever way to use this stuff. But you got to learn the stuff it uses first.
Yeah. When I was reading about it, I was like, okay, that means I need to understand what actually is money, right? What the heck is money, right? So let's like go way back. That's like thousands of years. Like where did that come from, right? Yeah. So cool. All right. So I think we talk about analytical thinking, philosophy. So I think let's talk about, I guess, education. I guess like, you know, what is education, right? Is education try to teach you all this analytical thinking, philosophy, or just getting you a job for you guys? Yeah. Or maybe I guess that's kind of leading into like, actually, or we can just go toward like talking about like debt cancellation that Matt need to go to bank about.
I don't know about.
Yeah.
All right. Well, first, are you going to make an argument for debt cancellation, Shu?
Yeah.
We'll skip the debt cancellation. Then we don't need to talk about education today. But
Yeah.
You go first.
For me, I definitely pro it because I have some debt. I guess I want it to be canceled. So personally, selfishly, yes. Also, I think it's good for the society in general, right? It's a good way to put the money back into the society. So if I don't need to pay the debt, right, the student loans, and then I can just put it back in the society. Yeah. Also, I guess that's my argument so far.
So do you think, so if the government's going to like give money out to sort of stimulate the economy, do you think debt cancellation is the best place it could go to?
Say it again?
Like if the money's going to, like if our goal is to stimulate the economy, right? We want the government to give out money to stimulate the economy. Do you think debt cancellation is the best place it could go to?
Yeah, because the people who are already having the debt, they are already educated, right? So they're already getting used to the luxury style of the enrichment of college, right? So they already they won't, be able to save as much, right? They won't try to save because they will try to spend money as much as they can.
So this will bring me on to another question. If you were going to give someone, a random person, $1,000, who would be the most likely to spend it all and spend it quickly?
Yeah, the educated person who are used to the lifestyle of a college student, right?
I'll say the opposite.
People who are, I think. Sorry, say that again, Mike.
I was just going to say, I'll say the opposite, where basically the most likely person to spend is someone who doesn't have it and never has had money.
So yeah, I'm going to stop trying the Socratic method now, but I think Mike's right. Like generally poor people will be the most likely to spend any money you give them because they have the most need. People who are college educated are going to be more likely in general to have their own high income and money and, not really have any need. Like obviously if you you think about it, right? Like you take it to the extremes, you give a multimillionaire $1,000, they're just like, they don't even care. They're like, sure, I'll just pocket it. Like that's not a big deal to them. But, you give it to someone who's like struggling to like feed their family, and, they're immediately going to go get their shitty car fixed and buy some groceries and, do something else with it, right? Which really attacks the crucial concept of why I think debt cancellation is a just bad idea, is because it predominantly goes to people who don't need it. This is not saying there's no one who's poor working class with debt, because obviously there are people like that. But if you just like Google, like, who has the most student debt, it's people with more income, and like the lowest income groups have the least college debt in the US. That's just how it is, because poor people are more likely to either go to like community colleges, which are rather cheap, or just not go to college at all. So when it comes to, say, like helping poor and working class people, in a pandemic or after a pandemic, or when it comes to stimulating the economy, I don't think debt cancellation is the best for either of those.
Who proposed the debt cancellation of student loans?
Well, I know Bernie Sanders was probably the one who made it the most popular in recent times. I mean, I'm guessing people have suggested it in the past. He could have suggested it 20 years ago, but he got the idea, certainly at least in 2016, he got it going around a lot. And it's popular on the internet, where there's like a lot of, like middle class, college educated millennials who are like, yeah, I want my debt canceled. So they're like, this is the greatest thing ever. But, is it actually the greatest thing ever? It's kind of like, well, sometimes people criticize things like the idea of a UBI, you give everyone money, because they're like, oh, you give money to rich people, why not just give it to poor people, right? Not even to going into that for right now, though. But like, this is like worse than that, because you're actually giving more money to wealthier people and then less money to poor people. So it's worse than just like a universal payment to everyone in terms of regressiveness.
Yeah, but a lot of these people not having a debt, they are basically, they go to school for education. They became teachers, right? Most of these are teachers, right? Try to educate, and when they get out, they got a job. And it doesn't pay a lot, right? So they are getting into this the vicious cycle of not be able to pay, and then having not been paid enough to pay off the loan, and they get education, right? So I think those are one of the people that are going to be impacted most, right?
Yeah, no. So I think an important thing for me to say here is, I might say like universal debt cancellation is not a good idea, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't address the issue of like student loans and education and stuff like that. So, what I would propose as like a moderately better idea, I'm sure other people could improve on it more, is there's something called income-driven repayment that's already a thing. So almost all federal student loans could qualify for income-driven repayment. And what you do is you'll pay 10% of your income, that's 10% of your discretionary income, which is defined as your income after 150% of the poverty level. And you will pay that. And after 20 to 25 years, if you haven't paid off all of your debt, it just gets canceled. The leftovers get canceled, removed, and you're free from it. So what this means, so since you're only paying 10% of your discretionary, it means no one's going to be like totally overwhelmed with debt, right? Like you have to pay some, but like you should have enough to survive, right? It's just like it's there, but it's not crushing. And since it gets removed after 20 to 25 years, even if you don't pay it off, it's not one of these like permanent things where you struggle to keep up with payments and you're collecting more interest and you're paying off. And there's like people who paid their equivalent loan, but because of interest, they still have tons to pay. So it gets rid of that. And since it's, it's based on a proportion, so the more money you make, the more you pay back, basically. So like someone who ends up really poor makes nothing, they pay little to nothing back on their loan. So that debt is canceled because they don't have income. But people who are really well off, like Michael here, who also has a student loan, you'd have to pay for it because that makes sense. So you could basically flip things so that every federal student loan is income-driven repayment, like unless you go through specifically request, do some other procedure, right? And since general people who go through college do make more money, most of them will be still paying it back. And then I would say you could also maybe offer something similar, like take the same idea to people who have debt now, right? Who have already taken out the loans, be like, okay, maybe there's a plan where you can transfer over, and we look at how much you've paid and how much you were, took out originally, and, do some sort of reasonably fair conversion to put them into a similar program so that, yeah, people who can get out, basically it ensures everyone can get out of debt. Like it's a way that everyone will get out of the debt, right? Like you're never going to be stuck with forever, but but you pay how much you can back into it.
So if you don't have any income, you don't need to pay?
That's right. Because if you are making less than 150% of the poverty line, you will pay nothing, as I understand it. I'm not an expert in this, but I was reading about it.
I think I read about that too, but the problem with that is that it's very hard to qualify, to apply for. And there was so much, hopes in there, and just having people just having hard time getting through the application process, getting actually everything. I guess everything government implemented half-heartedly. It's really hard to actually get to it, right?
Yeah. No. So if you look at the website for the federal government loans things for income-driven repayment, it says almost everyone qualifies, at least at one place. But I agree, it can be hard managing weird bureaucratic stuff, which is why if you make it default, right, then you don't have to jump through bureaucratic hoops to get it. It's what it is, right? That's what almost people go with the defaults. So, that's how people's loans would be. And there might be some people who are I'm really confident I can pay back my loans fast because I'm going to make a ton of money. And if I do the other payment plan, maybe, I'll end up spending less or whatever overall. But, if they want to jump through hoops, let them, I guess.
But why isn't that debt in the first place? Should college just be free?
Well, this is a fix that just addresses long-term debt. The price of education is obviously a problem that's, would need a more complex, harder solution. But
so even right now, right? You have K to 12 free already, right? Why can't you just make 4-year college free as well?
You could. We could do it like Germany, make the college free, but then you only actually get to go to college if you're a good student with good test scores and good grades, right? So I feel I'd be okay with that. That's the only thing I would say is there's a trade-off, right? We don't have everyone going to college and college being free. The places where college is free have higher standards for entrance.
K to 12 is free and everybody goes to K to 12.
Yeah, but not everyone needs to go to college. Let's be honest. Even we've all been to college, so we all know that many of the people who go to college didn't even need to go. And there's plenty of jobs that don't need anything to do with a college degree. Mm-hmm. And if you want the system to be, if you want to be able to make it affordable and stuff, I don't think you can provide it to literally everyone, at least right now. Why not? You probably want to start with something like the other countries, how they do free college, where it's restrictive, and then maybe you can keep increasing the amount if it's working and you have the budget. But I don't think you can just start saying everyone goes for free.
Of course, you could keep private universities, and people could pay and take loans, but it would just be a far smaller amount of people, I guess. So
that's true. That's absolutely true. No one would be let's ban private universities. You can't pay. But if you want to go to one of the public schools that are funded by the, stuff, they would have limited slots. And like I said, this is just how it works in the places where college is free, right? Because, it'd be difficult to say literally everyone goes to college for free. I don't think we have enough schools for that right now, at least.
Gotcha.
Well, plus in a way, it's if everyone goes to college for free, and there isn't even necessarily a tiering system, any kind of tiers of schools based on test scores or whatever. It's are we really just essentially going to have the entire country in grade school till they're 23? Or essentially, are we going to have here's 4 years of like adulting school where people like, I guess, live away from their families, but for free just to learn how to be adults. Or so, I mean, I don't know.
Keeping up with my earlier theme, I don't want to just criticize. Let me suggest a better idea. All right. Income-driven repayment better than debt cancellation. Rather than trying to send everyone to college for free, put that money towards pre-K, early childcare. Because I've glanced at some stuff. I've heard at least that like the investment to benefit of like that early education, like getting kids like in school when they're really young, socializing with teachers is like way more impactful. Because like, I mean, truth be told, by the time most people graduate high school, generally like whether they're going to be a good student or not, it's kind of already decided, right? Like they've grown up enough. I don't think many people have like a major turnaround. Some people do, but I don't think many people have a major turnaround in like their goals and their aspirations and their personality. But like apparently doing that stuff when you're young really impacts kids. So like, you know, kids who went to pre-K and childcare beforehand do better just overall.
Okay.
Yeah, that's smart to me.
And that's an interesting proposal. I think I like that. I mean, kids, they learn a lot, especially when they are younger, right? Much younger. So the most impactful thing you can do is start as young as possible.
Yeah.
Okay. What did you hear that from?
I've just seen like articles and stuff about it. I haven't dug into like the research itself, but the articles at least have claimed that like there's research on it that, major impacts for relative and, especially proportional to the money compared to something like college. And again, the thing though is people who want to go to college are voting age or about to be voting age, right? So, and they're online talking, but it might be smarter policy to focus on basically young children.
Okay.
So like free, like basically like rather than free college, free childcare, pre-K. And that also helps parents, especially if you're poor parents, right? Working class parents who are like struggling to like, might not be able to afford, to send their kids somewhere so they can work because, maybe they don't make that much money. So it costs almost as much to have their kid watched as they make in the shift where their kid was watched, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Apparently, it was something we could look up more, but apparently it's a really good policy. Is what I've heard.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Well,
I actually really like that, actually. I think that's a really good stuff. Maybe you should run for office and implement it.
Wow.
Give me 20 years before these podcasts sink me, because someone will be like, you know what he said 20 years ago? There'll be some progressive issue we haven't even thought of yet. And they'll be like, look how horrible of a person he was because he said XYZ in the past.
But no, I'll just say that research in developmental psychology, has shown numerous critical periods before the age of 5 where essentially like if the kid doesn't get language gets really bad just beyond 10 and and obviously like the elasticity of the brain is like insanely or the brain is like insanely elastic, like particularly in the first couple of years of life. So yeah, I guess that it just based on that research is what I'm going on, I guess, when I say that's a good idea.
That's why I feel personally I don't even need to go into developmental psychology. I guess for me personally, I grew up in China. I didn't even have school until I don't know 6, 7 years old, first grade. So I guess maybe that's why I always feel like even right now I feel somehow I'm very almost like I'm a late bloomer in a way, right? For me, it took a long time for me to realize things and get my brain to think better in a way, and still I try to learn a lot, and even reading stuff. I feel like I'm very behind with all my people all my same age, right? So it feels like it just took me a long time to really be actually learn a lot of stuff. Yeah, so I guess.
Yeah. Well, you all probably heard that reading to your kid when they're young is one of has a major impact in their expected educational success, and from there how much money they make and stuff, right? I mean, what is that but essentially a proto schooling for 3-year-olds, right? You sit them down, you show them a book, you read it to them, so yeah, I mean, because kindergarten starts right about 5, so you're we're starting school right at the kind of the end of this first most important period. So yeah, having a year or two, even just like a year or two before that, consistently of being like, hey, like the kid's gonna get some, exposure, education, just more socializing, more talking and stuff, probably would do really well.
Yeah.
Well, I would say, just to play devil's advocate a little bit, I do wonder in a more public, I guess, setting. I mean, obviously that period is pretty critical for things like empathy development, intimacy with family, things like that. So I guess depending on, how these public things are handled, public schooling setups are handled, like, will that impact, like, negatively people, like, the next generation's empathy or, I guess, feelings with family?
I thought you don't believe in empathy.
Yeah, empathy is a necessary thing to function in our social world.
Uh-huh. I've heard you can become president without much empathy, though. I don't know.
That's fair. Well, I mean, actually, like, another, I don't even remember if it was one of the psych classes I took at Tech, but yeah, it was, like, basically they did, like, the psychopath survey in, like, CEOs of, like, Fortune 500 companies. And it's, like, basically, like, they, there was a significant difference between, like, CEOs and, like, the general population. So.
Sounds like empathy holds people back, maybe.
No, it is a disadvantage.
Backstabbing everyone for success.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, like one thing about this early child stuff is you don't make it like required, right? Like if someone wants to stay home with their kid and like, interact and spend time with them, good for them. But especially for people who like, that's difficult for, I would say it's a better option than being like ignored in your house for like a while.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, that's fair. I mean, no, particularly like, I mean, I think this is great, particularly for kids who are dealing with sort of like broken households or, I mean, not getting attention or things like that, I guess. And I guess the counter to me would be like the kids in sort of warm households who are probably the ones sort of getting read to at this point and having that pseudo education without this. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
So going back to the debt a little bit, what about you're talking about like income-driven agreement, but what about income share agreement?
Oh, is that the thing where people like invest in college students?
Exactly. Not people. I mean, that's a different way of implementing it, right? But one way of doing it is having people invest in. Like, hey, I can give you the funding, but when you get a job, just pay it back, right? So now it's like you almost like let everybody, almost like it became a human capital, right? You basically invest in the people, right? Which is one way of doing it. And the other way is having the school do it, right? So you go to college, school basically say, hey, you come in tuition free, right? You sign an agreement, but when you get a job, you basically pay back a certain amount of your income, right? So that way, when you go out, you are not pressured to have to get a job and that you don't like to pay it back in a loan, right? You just like, okay, if the job I want, I can start paying back, right? So basically, you shift the burden onto like school instead of the student individual, and also shift it to like rich investor, right? So
it's interesting because of like the incentives it sets up, like because if you have like outside investors, they just want to make sure they loan or whatever to like good potential students, but it really motivates a school. Like if the school's burdening it, like it really motivates them to like set up their students for success, at least financially. Some people do argue like the purpose of academia is not just to make the most money, but like on the flip side, like as a student, you could always be like, oh, I don't have any debt, but most people want to make money. So it's not like you're going to have, I don't imagine you'll have like thousands, just tons of people who are like, fuck you, I don't have to pay this back. I'm going to be poor my whole life, right? Like most people will be like, yeah, I'll go get some money, get a job, and then, try to pay it back at least. It's an interesting idea. Again, this doesn't fix the cost of education in the first place, but that's an interesting way to deal with debt. I guess the one issue with those two things, potentially, is would investors and or schools become too risk averse and then like end up not allowing like even less people to go than we talked about with other things, like being like, we're only going to fund like clearly good overachieving students. Everyone else get fucked. You know, you don't have your opportunity to try to like get a college degree and go do more.
Yeah, that's a fair criticism, I think, or caution, right? Because like the school just start like accepting only engineering students, you know, those like high paying jobs instead of like philosophy majors and then educators. And
I didn't even think about it from a major perspective, but you're absolutely right. Like there are known, like, I mean, they have the data, right? Like the average starting salary of like people from different majors, that would encourage institutions to just be like, oh, you want to do this? Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know.
What if they started charging based on the major you were
in? Yeah, that works too, actually. Yeah, maybe you can have higher percentage of pay getting deducted when you are based on your. I mean, it's an idea that the way you implement it could be very different, right? Yeah.
Wait, but who's paying more in this situation, though, Mike?
What do you mean? Like, I guess if you were a computer science major, like your tuition would be higher.
Just because you're more able to pay?
Correct.
From each according to their, you know, capability, or what was it that Mark said?
Yeah, no. I mean, I think it's a terrible idea. I was just throwing it out there. It just occurred to me when you were like, well, we have the data on how much people make, and I'm like, that's true, so.
But tuition is free anyway, so you cannot do it based on tuition, right? You can only based on like how much you pay in the end, like how more, maybe you can charge, like get more percentage out of the pay based on your income.
Well, I was even thinking of the current system, right? Because I mean, in theory, in theory, the colleges could argue, like, I mean, a computer science education at any college is literally worth more than an English education at basically any college. So,
yeah,
that help out teachers because that help out teachers too. But I don't know if I do kind of like the idea though that students can go to school and kind of like pick and change their major as they see fit. I feel like that's a good freedom because, you know, not everyone jumps in the thing they want the most. And then what? Then they're like, oh shit, like if I'm changing my major, like my tuition payments change. Like does every class have a cost that's like broken down? So if you want to take like an elective in computer science, it's really pricey because it's like, oh, you know, all computer science courses are pricey. Like,
yeah, no, I mean, there would definitely be details. And I understand college is supposed to be about discovery, and
is it?
That's why I say, well, I mean, that's what they tell me. I don't know.
But sounds like, so what's the purpose of college then? Is discovery. Like, what do you pay like $30,000 a year to do discovery? And that sounds like a luxury to me, right?
Well, that's why we say pay back your lunch.
So what's the purpose of college?
I mean, it's both the things you mentioned earlier. It's to fundamentally learn more, become educated, and it's also to be able to get a good paying job, like advance your professional career. But like, I took a sociology class, okay? One sociology class, and they broke down students into different categories. So there's like the genuine academics who like are there to learn. There's like the social people who are there to like basically have fun. There's people who are just motivated purely by like career. They just want to get a better job. And then they had athletes as their own category, which is obviously the smallest. People who, are just there because they're like trying to play football or something. But I actually forget, if the social category wasn't the biggest, it was close. It might have been the biggest one, that like a huge chunk of students are actually just at college basically to have fun and to party and to like meet people and do stuff. Like motivations of getting a job or learning are secondary to them.
Yeah.
So that exists. And yeah.
Well, let's say, okay, so having the experience and also job replacement, right? Is like, let's say, like maybe half, right? 50% of the school should be focused on getting an experience, and the other one train students have job, right? However, one thing is the most of the college, they don't focus on job placement, right? if you look at each school's like career centers, right, that's probably only like less than 1% of resources are allocated to job placement, right? So they don't like for example, Mike. Now, how did you get your job? Did you have to? I think you hire a recruiter or something.
No, I got contacted by the company, but
yeah,
so
yeah.
I mean, I did go use career services. Like I did go to career, but
did you find it very useful?
No, no. I mean, I had offers in hand before they were super useful. So
yeah. So I guess what I heard is like the college, most of them they don't allocate the resource properly to help students get jobs, right? They just have like allocate one almost like they don't focus on that. And the income share agreement is one way to incentivize them to maybe put more resource into like job placement for students, right?
All right, counter argument. Is job placement the purpose? Like, is that really the purpose of the university? Because I guess my perspective would have been like universities help students get jobs by giving them education and experience and setting them up to be like qualified candidates, and then so people can get the jobs themselves. Like is a college supposed to like handhold you into your first job essentially? Because that's never really been how it's done, at least in this country, right?
Well, yeah. No, otherwise, it's an investment, right? You pay $30,000 a year to go to college, right? I mean, what do you expect? Do you just like go there as a luxury to enrichment, right?
No, you go there to learn and to get a degree so that you have the knowledge and the credentials to actually like apply to these jobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Although, yeah, and honestly, if you really want like a guaranteed job out of college, like almost everyone who did like internships and co-ops and things like that seemed to like have easy job opportunities when they're ready to leave.
Mm.
And I know at least a good chunk of colleges try to encourage that stuff. So, but even ignoring that, right? Like if a college gives you the knowledge and the qualifications, is that like not enough?
I would say, yeah. I mean, it's because a student can get into do other things that distract them from whatever, actually like getting a job, right? So, I mean, I guess responsibly you shift all the responsibility to the student instead of like. So that's why people end up with a lot of debts of not being able to pay off student loans, right? Because they get into a major, they just go there to have fun. But when they graduate, right, they realize, oh shit, I need to pay off all these loans. But the school doesn't have the incentive to say, hey, we need to get you a job so you can pay off the loan, right? It's like you put everything on the responsibility on the students, right? So instead of, if it's a business, like if you see like school as a business because you pay that money to go there, right, you want certain good outcome, right? But the school is not incentivized to do that in a way.
You're right. This would change the school's incentives. But I mean, so like with the setup right now, I would argue the school did their job, right? Like if someone wants to pay for a degree that, and the school gives them the classes, teaches them, gives them the degree, the school fulfilled its obligation, I would argue. Mm. And, you go to college as an adult, like 18-year-olds aren't entirely stupid. I mean, they might not be the most mature, but like, the 18-year-olds know what money is, right? Like, I think they can and should understand that, like, hey, you're going to have to pay this off, like when you take career counseling, like they always talk, at least I did public schools in Louisiana. So this is not the cream of the crop when it comes to, high school education. And even our career services, they'd do these dumb personality tests and be like, oh, these are the things you might fit. And then they'd talk about like expected, how much these things usually make, and they would like, not in super detail, but they bring up the concepts of like, hey, if you're looking at college careers, money's part of the equation. So I don't feel like how you go to college and be like, oh, I just forgot I had to like pay back these loans, right? Like that's on you. If someone wants to pay for a fun time, quote unquote, I don't hold it against them, but yeah.
Well, to be fair, everybody's not you, right? So a lot of people are not as adult as you. So actually, we're talking about the career counseling. I never had that counseling when I was in high school. So
really, they never did anything like, here's what careers you might be good for, anything like that?
No. Did you, Matt? Did you, Mike?
My school wasn't great because I actually went to again public school, but Massachusetts, so that's a different ballgame. But I mean, and to be fair, I think the education again was like probably on the higher end. But yeah, the I guess counseling guidance counselor type staff was not necessarily the strongest. So they maybe had like one meeting with us where they were talked about college and thinking about loans and career, but it was not at all extensive. But I mean, but I sort of am on Matt's side though, that it's very hard for me to say like if you couldn't make that decision at 8, like I mean you should have some awareness at 18. Like I mean, granted, just maybe it's because I grew up in a family like where money was an issue. Like I was very cognizant of like choose wisely at that point. But but it's a different situation.
Yeah, I guess my point is I just want school to have a little bit more incentive to get people some good jobs, right? Because they're not allocated enough resource to do that anyway.
Yeah.
But I think,
I do think that's certainly a reasonable thing. And you could maybe even like a milder solution might be like, federal grants or stuff. Maybe they're like, hey, we want to see like, or even like accreditation, be like, hey, if not enough of your students are like actually getting jobs, like that being like a metric that's used to evaluate schools and say, hey, like, are you doing something wrong if you're graduating like a lot of people who are failing to like, do something afterwards successfully? But
I feel like it is already, because I mean, like my undergrad will send endless emails about like how it's like one of the top ranked schools in the nation with respect to like return on investment and all that type of, so I mean, I think certainly Forbes and the Princeton Review and all of them are incorporating that. So
that's good. All right.
Oh, they're ahead of us.
Yeah.
All right. I guess we can talk about that forever, but yeah. So let's shift gear to Mike's. Anything else, Mike, you want to talk about? Like your psychology article about fear and stuff?
So this article talks about like how, so like you're going into a meeting at work and obviously you get anxious or you get fearful, and particularly people who have, maybe more difficult jobs or something, or more have to deal with more difficult bosses or something, will get this like anxiety that back, in 2000 BC, someone would get when they're, being stalked by like, some carnivorous animal in like a jungle or something. And I mean, I guess they're like, basically, I mean, you need your heart rate to increase. You need your, like basically to produce and I guess give off more hormones and sweat and everything else to give you the best chance of surviving in that moment, right? So basically now we're getting that going into like a stressful work meeting, which is obviously we don't need that type of response to survive. And so and obviously it's damaging. I mean, when your body is in that highly active state, it can be damaging of your heart if it's occurring frequently. So I guess the point of this article was like, so neuroscientists basically found, so the activation of the amygdala, which long been pointed to as the area of the brain associated with fear, but it was sort of coactive with this area that interacts with the thalamus, which is going to communicate things to sort of the rest of your body, like control heart rate and stuff. And basically their point was like, okay, like maybe if you have these learned fear memories, maybe there's a way we can essentially like, I don't want to say cut off, but like not permanently, obviously, but like cut off these, the connection between this and that area of the brain that's associated with, or largely associated with movement and interacts with the thalamus to essentially like not make you experience like the like lived anxiety of like those meetings, right? So it's like, I mean, you may, so there may, I mean, I don't know how your conscious experience would change, but basically like, make you, and I mean, there's similar findings in pain and things like that. So people literally, like when it comes to like, if you cut your hand or something, there's people who have had insults to their brain where essentially like they're aware their like hand is badly cut, but they don't, it doesn't bother them. They're just like, oh, my hand's bleeding like crazy. Like they're aware of where the cut is, but they don't experience like the dread you get when you see yourself like injured. And that's because like of an insult to like their insular cortex. So, so I guess I was curious in getting what you guys think about like, I guess taking potentially chemical agents to facilitate this, or just general impressions.
So basically, you want to targeted smart lobotomies to certain parts of the brain to get rid of undesirable, emotions. Is that one way to phrase it?
That's yes. Well, I mean, that's actually what this like at the end, this article suggested essentially that. And I was like, I'm all for it once we understand how the brain works, in which case I don't even know if anxiety will be an issue because we'll just be on computers probably at that point.
Yeah, like the amygdala, if I said that right, it's like, yeah. I imagine it might do something else important besides like your fear response. So I don't know, either nuking it or nuking its connections to other parts of the brain might have bad side effects.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I often think of it as like antidepressants, right? It's like, hey, we don't really understand depression fully, but like, and I mean, granted, they definitely work for some people, like anti-anxiety meds, and they're getting better and better, but it's like basically we see essentially a lower amounts than serotonin in certain individuals who are depressed versus other people. So we're just going to like throw a pill to make sure there's more serotonin and see what happens. I mean, in a way, I feel like this would be like, hey, you have an anxiety before a meeting. We're going to like try to throw a pill to like shut down this area of your brain for a couple of hours. So, yeah.
Is that what they're really suggesting? I don't remember reading that in the end of the article. And they were suggesting like taking some kind of chemical to do. I feel like every time I have a meeting with someone, like some kind of performance review, right? It's very, very normal to get like anxious. Oh, am I gonna be criticized? Like getting like bad feedback, right? Of like from other people, right? Or people maybe thinking my boss is thinking I'm doing a very bad job, even though maybe I did a good job, right? So I feel that's kind of normal. I feel like it sounds like it's suggesting a very dramatic measure for something that's not really
well, we've been talking about, I guess, when you get out of college and you take a job you might not want or something to that effect. I mean, I guess, like, they're talking about people who just essentially every day they feel right. like anxious or like some type of, like, oppression, like, emotionally, like, disturbed based on their job. So basically, like, every day they're dealing with something that goes beyond just like, oh, I'm a little nervous and it's not, or like, I guess like there's some maybe baseline anxiety isn't bad. It's just, I mean, it's well shown that like, I mean, increases in cortisol, which come from stress, like damage your heart over time. Like if it's significant enough. So, yeah, so I guess basically it's those people who it's like where they're actually getting like, sort of hyperventilating before meetings or something like that.
Gotcha.
Or getting very, very stressed.
So I would suggest, with my profound medical knowledge, and then instead of doing that, have you heard of something called Stoicism?
The word?
The Stoic philosophy.
Stoic
for thousands of years. Yeah, Matt, can you explain that?
I was saying, yes, I've heard of it. Stoicism, it's, it's basically suck it up in philosophy form, right?
Yeah, kind of in a way. It's back in the day, like Marcus Aurelius, right? He's the Roman emperor. He could be considered one of the Stoic philosophers, and also Seneca. right? All these Roman, like ancient philosophers, they talk about like basically almost like very similar to Buddhism kind of in a way, right? Kind of like, oh, life is suffering. You kind of need to experience like actually right way of, so okay, this is normal, right? This is what life is in a way, right? Think about it, like frame it that way. And also he even suggested that every once in a while, right, we should, I think Seneca suggested once in a while you need to, even though we are living very comfortable life, right? Every once in a while you should like maybe 1 week or 1 day try to put yourself in a situation where almost like you are living in destitute, right? Maybe only eat like a bread or eat every day for a week or something, and even wear like dirty clothes like homeless people, right? So live like that for like a week or something, right? So basically to make you experience that what's the worst case that could happen. Like what happens if this happens, you lose all your money, right? It's like, once you experience it, it's like, oh, you still survive. It's not too bad, right? So it's a way to guard against like your anxiety, almost in a way, right? So anyway, next, maybe you should look into Stoicism. So.
Yes, well, no, I mean, the perspective, I think it can be very important. I mean, I think the simple solution is, you know, if your job is literally going to kill you, then leave it. But I guess it's easier said than done.
Yeah. Anyway, we probably, I'm gonna probably bring up a little bit more Stoicism stuff once I read more about it. So it's pretty cool stuff, interesting stuff. Yeah.
That'd be cool. Is that gonna be your new philosophy in life?
Maybe, yeah. Could be. Yeah, could be. Yeah.
Choose philosophy of the month.
That could be a topic.
What?
That could be like a repeated segment on this podcast. Choose philosophy of the month.
Exactly. Okay, let's do that. So, I guess last few things. The starter idea I was talking about. Like, what do you think about YouTube for voice? Like,
YouTube should just have a non-audio video version. I've actually wanted this specifically, but well, first of all, isn't YouTube for voice just podcasts?
That's what I was going to say.
Yes, it is. But remember, right now, like we have to pay, even for this podcast, we have to pay monthly fee to host our podcast, right, in a somewhere server, right, like $10 a month or something like that. But you can upload like videos to YouTube, like unlimited without you don't need to pay for anything, right? So why there's no such thing for voice, like for voice creator, like could be podcast, but podcast is a format, right? But maybe there's some creative people that create something, whole different format for entertaining, right? So anybody can just upload audio. So
yeah, no, it makes sense. I think there is a niche that's not fully like captured, but I don't know. I feel like it's small enough that it'd be really hard to find the space between just uploading to YouTube anyway and doing a podcast. Like, because there are people who upload videos to YouTube that's like a still shot image at a low resolution, and then they just talk.
Yeah.
And I've listened to stuff like that before, and then I've been annoyed that YouTube doesn't have an option just to like be like no video, just audio, save us both the bandwidth. Like I feel like that could be a simple feature they could add. I'm guessing the issue is they don't want to deal with audio only advertisements, and they might just be like, you know, like having a new brand of advertisements to fulfill might not be worth it for them, but I don't know.
What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was thinking of more of the advertisement angle sort of as well. Just as because often these podcast apps, they won't, some of them will have ads sort of built in like between podcasts or something, and they often have a visual component as well. But I mean, it seems as though it's often, like when it comes to audio, like they're making money from the content creator, whereas like visual, visual companies or companies that use visuals are often making money from the content consumer.
Back in like the 20th century, there's something called radio.
And, what's radio?
That is fair. Yes.
What is radio?
I actually do listen to Sirius XM, which has reads. So yeah.
So I think your point is good. However, I'm not talking about how to make money from that right now. I'm talking about like, is this thing going to be useful? Is it going to be add value to people? Like, do people want this? Right? It's not about how to put ads in there. Those are going to be down in the line later in the future. But I'm also saying, like, is this going to be useful to people? Will people want this? Right?
All right. Here's how I would analytically think about this. Does it provide a benefit? Yes, but there's also a cost to using a new website or service. Like I might feel more annoyed about it. Like, it's always annoying to me when I have to like use a new website or sign up for something new or go to someplace different, download a new app, blah, 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 right? Like, it's more convenient to use what I already have set up. And I might be more resistant to new things in that regard than most people just because I hate downloading apps and things like that. Yeah. But the benefit of like a slightly different audio format versus like the cost of like getting people to sign up and learn about a new thing, I feel like the cost outweighs. Like, there's more headache for the little bit of like advantage.
Is it little or a lot of advantage?
Little.
So right now, I think you're only thinking about, okay, it's almost like a YouTube, just an audio version of YouTube. However, once you create that platform, it depends on what people create, right? You don't know what people are going to create, right? It could be something that, of course, it could be just a feature, like YouTube feature of audio version. But however, I think it has potential to people's creativity is unlimited, right? Almost in a way. So, I mean, you don't know what people are going to create, right? So,
I mean, that's true, and I'm not doubting the ability for people to create interesting audio content. It's just that there's nothing that they could create that they couldn't either put on YouTube or a podcast already. So the value that this is adding is a slightly different way to get send people audio to listen to, right? But there's already a lot of ways to do that.
But podcast, not everybody can do that, right? It's only because you need to pay monthly. Normal people is not going to take record a voice or create a voice content and just upload to the podcast because they have to pay for it, right? It's not, you want to make it easy for users just to, like YouTube, very easy to create a voice content and upload it, right? Yeah.
I mean, I agree. I would argue anyone who's going to be like doing something really that amazing with audio content would probably be okay with like the $10 a month that you have to pay. And again, YouTube is free. You can just slap a picture in for the video. Okay. You're really like just like a broke, 13-year-old who has a great idea. So like that's what I'm saying. Like, it's not. I see where this could be potentially somewhat more convenient. It's just, I don't know if there's enough there. Not to be a Debbie Downer on your idea.
No, that's good. That's why it's good when you are attacking an idea, right? You have to attack an idea, right? Yeah.
Oh, I had a startup idea, but I'm not going to say it on recording. But if y'all want, we can close this podcast out, and I'll tell you it's genius.
Okay, all right. For me, ideas should be free, and anybody can take it. I want if someone gonna create this and then make it into an idea, that's perfect. That means I don't need to do it myself, right? And also, that's one thing. The other thing is about I believe it's about execution, right? Because even you have a good idea, execution is like, idea is probably only like 0.01% of the whole thing, right?
No.
So
I agree with that. Often the execution is much more important than the idea. There's rarely do people have truly original ideas. Usually the first big breakthrough or innovation is just someone executing it better, right?
Yeah, even Google, right? He's like the 10th search engine, right? And Facebook is like what, the 3rd or 4th or 10th social network.
Amazon was not the first online store, things like that.
What's the first one?
Well, I mean, there were other just like websites selling random stuff.
Yeah.
eBay was a good example of like a general store that like allowed sellers to come on. I mean, eBay had a different vision and it's still successful, but clearly it's not Amazon successful,
All right. So if there's anything else, I want to end with the question, the question on there, right? There's a question I heard last week I feel like, and it's for me, I really like the question. Like, what would you do? What would you stop doing if you have only 10 years to live?
You lead off, Shu.
Yeah.
Oh, I will stop working on my PhD. Exactly. Yeah. That's the one thing I talk about. It's like, dang, I really need to stop working on my PhD. Like, even though I'm down into my final chapter, right? And then I'm gonna spend another maybe the next 6 months, 3 months, 6 months to finish and defend it. But if I only have 10 years to live, this is like 0.5% of my lifetime. Like, is it worth it, right? So yeah. So I'll definitely stop working on my PhD and do something else. Yeah.
See, that's an interesting insight, because I could see other people saying, maybe that's one of the things they would want to make sure they do that accomplishment, right? But it kind of tells us how you value your PhD, right? Like, do you see that as a significant accomplishment, something you want to finish, or is it just something like you've been doing and you're just like, oh yeah, like if I don't have time, I'm just going to say forget it. So, I mean, that's probably the purpose of the question, right? Just to kind of prioritize, like, okay, like what's really important to you. If you knew like you didn't have an enormous amount of time left, and to tell you to be like, maybe that's what you should be focusing on anyway. But
yeah,
it's hard. You usually think of these questions as what would you do, as opposed to what would you not or stop doing, rather.
I don't know. It might motivate me to like be less, maybe a little less distracted, like with internet and games and other stuff. I probably would cross my mind more, be like, hey, like I don't have like forever, it'd make you face that mortality to be like, I should really do the things I want to do. But I don't think I would change too much, because 10 years isn't super short. And overall, I still think I'm kind of going towards the goals that I'd want to continue doing anyway. And there's nothing that's like more than 10 years out that I'm trying to work on right now. So
no,
that's good.
Fair.
It's kind of a boring answer, but
no, I mean, it's a valid answer right now. An answer can change over time, right? I think asking the question, like, to me, a lot of times asking a question is kind of frame your thinking differently. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we're probably, I don't know, more goal-driven people. I just assume anyone who tries to do a PhD is more already accustomed to like setting and doing long-term goals. I feel like, yeah, if you're already like naturally, you tend to like do the goals, set goals and work towards them. That's probably what would, probably won't change too much.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to die before you can achieve those goals.
Yeah. But you are right. It's more like help you like prioritize stuff in your life, right? So yeah. All right. What about you, Mike? Have you talked about anything or no?
I mean, I feel like, I mean, I had a punchline answer that I was gonna go with, and then what?
Oh, and I say, okay, good.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, my punchline answer was I'd stop wearing condoms. So, but
nice.
But I was actually trying to take it somewhat seriously, because basically I just don't like I'd like to think, I mean, as Matt says, like 10 years is long enough where it's like I'd like to think like I'd stop, I guess moderating my behavior so much, like I'd be able to live more freely and stop worrying about like work. But as Matt says, like 10 years is a pretty long time. Like you're still, like you're not going to want to, like if you go like 6 months, it's like, okay, at that point, like it's pretty much over. Yeah, exactly. Quit your job, But it's like 10 years. It's like you probably want to keep working. You want to make sure your family is taken care of as best you can, at least till sort of, and you're not homeless for 9 years. So, I mean, but yeah, I mean, I'd like to think that you'd at least stop. I guess you could at least say stop worrying. Like, so we discussed the anxiety thing before. So like essentially, you only have 10 years left, like say, like I'm not going to worry about, the meeting on Monday morning because it doesn't matter. Like worst case, like I am dead in 9+ years anyway. So
use an existential crisis to counteract other forms of anxiety and issues, right? You're like, I no longer care about these things that give me stress because I'm soon going to be dead, cease to exist, and no one will remember me. And then you're at peace, right?
Yeah.
You should write a book.
Rob Schneider actually, I think, talked about like he had some guru or something. They were essentially that was it. Like anytime you're having like an anxiety episode about something like material in the world, the guy was like, just think you're going to be dead soon. It won't matter. I was like, it works, but it's like, I feel like that's just asking to foster some more profound anxiety, like deep rooted anxiety. So
it's like, it's like my broken finger hurts. Let's cut it off. Like, is this the best solution? It kind of helps.
Yeah, I guess it helps. Well, I mean, the finger cutting off doesn't necessarily even help in the moment, but maybe the anxiety thing like might help in the moment, but like I think over time it would probably just cause more damage.
All right, I think that's a pretty good place for today. Memento mori, I guess that's the place to end.
All right. Next week, I put in a thing. We're going to talk about Jeff Bezos trying to put a woman on the moon.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's my contribution.
All right.
Stay tuned. It's going to be very exciting.
Junto Club.